Hey guys, hope you all fine. This is Ali Ahmed, biology teacher. We will continue our work with the third secondary year LS section, the part of nervous system. And this is the new chapter, which is our chapter 10, documents 1, maintaining posture. We will start by taking a look on something that you have taken before. And let's start by this. For this little bird, observe its reaction. Oh, it's trying to make a reaction against or toward a guest. This is a female. And this reaction tries to attract the female to the nest. Do you think that this reaction is voluntary or involuntary? As a bird, we suppose it involuntary. For this guy, it tries to make some fun. But what's that? He tried to get rid of that car. And for these two guys on the motorcycle, what is that? This is a good behavior against a danger. And this is also another protecting behavior. And the same for that one. Do you think all these reactions are voluntary reactions? As in this case, avoiding the train needs a very quick intervention of your nervous system. And this is what we call a reflex. This reflex actually is an involuntary reaction performed as a response to a stimulus. And for the reflex to be done by your body or by the body of an animal, it has similar structures that are generally used by the body in order to make the reaction, the desired reaction for the protection. In that case, the general structures involved in this kind of body reactions begin with a sensory receptor that is receiving a stimulation and creating and transmitting a nerve message in a sensory neuron toward a nerve center, whatever this nerve center is, like the spinal cord and other nerve centers as the medulla or as the cerebellum. This nerve message that is called sensory message is transmitted to the nerve center where it will be transmitted to a motor neuron related to an effector organ that is usually a muscle. In that case, the nerve message will be transmitted to the motor neuron, then to the effector organ, to the muscle, leading to its contraction. This is the general pathway of the nerve message during a reflex. In the nerve center, the sensory neuron might be connected directly to the motor neuron by a synapse, or indirectly by a set of neuronic network of many neurons, at least one, that we will call interneuron in some cases. This general pathway of the nerve message will be helpful for us in order to understand what is happening in some kinds of reflexes that we will try to explain and clarify in the next slides. But we have to understand very carefully what does a contraction of a muscle mean. In this slide, you can observe the muscle And for a muscle, obviously the muscle has a length, but this length is able to be reduced by the muscle itself after it receives a stimulation or a nerve message. This reduction of the length is accompanied by forces applied by the muscle itself on its extremities that appear white in this figure and that we call tendons. The muscle can apply forces on the two tendons and it can pull the bones to which it is related by the tendons, and by applying these forces the muscle can be able to move the bones, whatever the movement is can be described by. But this movement can be only made by the contraction of the muscles that makes the muscle shorter. And when the muscle goes at rest again after its contraction, it will return to its initial length. This initial length that is taken by the muscle is obtained by muscle relaxation. We have to know from now that the relaxation of the muscle is not able at all to make any force. The relaxation of the muscle just stops the force that was done by the contraction of it. Because of that, the relaxation is not able to pull the muscles to pull again, or to push the muscles that are related to it can't push the bones that are related to this muscle when the muscle relaxes. Now, let's see another type or another one of the reflexes that we are trying to understand more. This girl is standing up in this video. You can see she is about she has about 6 months, and she is standing. This reaction of the girl is done in order to keep the balance of the body at the top of the hands that hold her. This reaction is a kind of reflex. I will show you another one. Try to observe the movement of the hands and the head of the girl in that case. Can you observe? This reaction is made, and try to think about the muscles that can be at the origin of the reflex in the first state, and in this other state, the girl is trying to bend her body in order to keep some balance here. Oh. And in this new situation, for an inclination to the two sides of the body, also she is trying to make a balance by making contraction of some of her muscles. In order to better understand these reactions and these reflexes, we have to understand the movements of the body parts. We will take this small and simple example of the hand, the arm, the forearm, and the hand. The arm can move, and the forearm also can move in that case, in that way. You can see that the forearm is bending here toward the arm, and it is opened again. You can see the movements bending, and you can say stretching or something else. But scientifically, we have to know that this movement is called flexion. And the other movement of the forearm is called extension. You have to keep these two terms in mind. And before I pass to another slide, I want you to observe well the two muscles. The two muscles that are shown on the arm, these muscles are the muscles responsible for the movement of the forearm, and that you will be able to observe their states. Are you observing the muscles, their length, their state? Are they contracted? Are they relaxed? So keep thinking about these muscles, and we will try to explain them more in the slides that will come. And in order to understand that we have understood these two terms, I have to show you some figures, and these figures you have to think before I will show you the answers about the two movements that are shown by the arrows, the blue one and the orange one. What one of them corresponds to a flexion, and what one of them corresponds to an extension? Can you think before I will give you the answer? Please. This movement is trying to make the leg closer to the thigh, more closer to the thigh. And the blue one is trying to open the leg and get it far from the thigh. I have to remind you that this is the thigh, that we call it scientifically thigh, and this is the leg, and this is the foot. This is the foot, yes. And this movement is called flexion. This other movement will be called extension. And you can easily understand that the two movements that we are showing here are two opposite movements. Okay? Now, we will pass now to this movement of the foot. The foot also can be moved inward or outward relatively to the leg. The orange arrow represents extension or flexion of the foot. It represents flexion. The opposite for the blue one, this is an extension. So extension really tries to open the body parts, but the flexion tries to make some kind of close. It let the body become close, the parts of the body become close to each others. Okay. For the hand, can you now also guess what are these two movements, the up one and the downward one? This is an extension, and this is a flexion. Here, the trunk. You can see the body, all the trunk of the body is trying to be close to all the legs. And here the body trunk is getting far from the legs. Bending the trunk of the body is a movement called flexion. And stretching it is a movement called extension. Also, in each of these movements, there are some muscles that are involved by contracting and making some bones pulled or they are pulled to become closer to each others. Okay? And this is also another case where the extension of the leg can be observed, and this is the flexion of the leg. So, enough examples can make us understand what does an extension and what does a flexion mean. But the important thing is about the roles of the muscles in these movements. Back to the first example, which is the example of the arm and the forearm. You can see in this case the length of the muscle that is in front of the arm, and we will give it a name. after a while. This length, what does it do when the arm and the forearm move together? And the length for the other muscle, this one, what does this length do? I want you to observe carefully the two muscles when I make the flexion. This is the flexion. As you see here, you can see when I make flexion, what does each of the two muscles do? The length of it is going shorter or longer. So from the length of the muscle, you can know if the muscle is contracting or relaxing. I will show you. This is the flexion. This is the new length of the muscle that for the front one, it becomes shorter, but for the back one, it will become longer. So what one of the two muscles is the contracting one? Now you are able to know this is the muscle that contracts. And obviously, this is the muscle that is relaxing. Okay? So what one of the two muscles is responsible for the flexion when it contracts? I just said that the muscle that contracts is the muscle that is applying forces on bones. The muscle that relaxes, it doesn't apply any force. Because of that, we have to understand that the muscle that contracts is the muscle that is responsible for the movement shown here, which is the flexion. And here we go, we are calling this muscle the flexor muscle, since it is responsible for the flexion. Okay? Now, I will continue. This is the length of the flexor muscle, and this is the length of the other one. What do you have to say if you observe an extension? What one of the two muscles gets shorter during extension? This one, it gets longer, as you see. And this one, it gets shorter, as you see. So what one of them is contracting during this movement? This is the muscle that contracts, and this is the muscle that relaxes. And in that case, you just understood that the muscle that contracts here is responsible for the extension, and this it is the back muscle of the arm, which we call extensor muscle. So here you will have two muscles in the arm. A muscle that contracts during extension, and obviously it relaxes during flexion, and the muscle that contracts during flexion, and obviously it will relaxes during extension. Because of that, we call them extensor and flexor muscles. And because of the two movements that have been done are two opposite movements, the two muscles are considered as opposite muscles, and they are called antagonistic muscles. Always when you perform any movement in your body, when a flexor muscle is contracting, the other muscle that is opposite to it, which is the antagonistic one, it will relaxes. And if the extensor muscle contracts, the flexor one, which is opposite to it and antagonistic to it, it will relaxes also. We will try to apply these ideas, these notions on some examples. In this case, can you tell me what is the movement of the leg that is done here? Yes, it is an extension, because the leg, it gets far from the thigh. But for the muscles, what can you say about the roles of the muscles? What one of the muscles should become shorter? What one of them should become longer? Yes, the upper muscle, which is related to the leg from the front, it will become shorter in order to pull the leg upward. Yes, which is the muscle that contracts. And because of that, what do you call this muscle that contracts during extension? We will see. The other muscle is the muscle that relaxes during extension. Because of that, this muscle is called the flexor muscle. It will contract only during flexion, and the other muscle is the extensor one. Done? I will take another example. In this example, you can see this muscle that is at the back of the leg, and it is connected to the foot from here. What will happen if this muscle gets shorter? What does it do for the foot? And what do we call this movement of the foot? Okay, this movement is an extension. And since the muscle that contracts in that case is this one, the other muscle will relaxes. Because of that, this muscle will be called flexor muscle, and the other one, it will be called extensor. Again, we will have to know that all the muscles that we have them on the front of our body, not all of them actually, the most of them are muscles that when they contract, they make the body closer, the body parts closer to each others. Because of that, all these muscles that are here on my neck and on my front part of my chest, or in the front part of the leg, all these muscles are actually flexor muscles. But I have only one muscle that we will study, and it will be on the back of the body, and it is a flexor muscle also. This is the muscle of the thigh, because this muscle of the thigh, it will bend the leg backward, closer to the thigh from back. These all are this idea make easier for us to memorize that all the muscles that are from the front of the body are flexor, and I have only one muscle that is extensor, that is flexor from the back. The opposite is also correct. All these muscles that are on the back, they can make extension for my body parts. This is the extensor muscle, for example. This is the extensor of the head. This is the extensor of the trunk. And this is the extensor of the foot. And one of the muscles, and this is the extensor of what? Of the forearm. One of these muscles is the extensor of the leg, which is in front. So all the muscles that are in my back are extensor muscles, and each one is an extensor for one of the body parts. And only one muscle that we will study is on the front of the body, which is the extensor muscle of the leg. So all these are extensor muscles. Now, after we tried to explain the activities of muscles in the body movements, we will go again to the example of this girl. This girl is trying to make what? Extension or flexion? In this case, does it make an extension or a flexion? I want you to think. In that case, the girl is trying to not bend her body. So she is making an extension. So what are the muscles that make extension of her back? These are the extensor muscles of the back that are found on the back of our body. Okay? This contraction, it will make the extension continuous and prevent the flexion and the bending of the body to the front. Okay, in this case, downward. They prevent the bending of the body downward because the girl is inclined, as we see. And also in the case, in the other cases, when we bend her to the side, you will see the same. So you can observe her making this balance. In that case, she is contracting the flexor muscles. She is making flexion of her body in order to get balanced. Okay? please think about the muscles that are contracting and the muscles that are making flexion, that are making relaxation. Now, in that case, she is contracting the muscles on the opposite side of her position. Now, if we want to understand more what is happening in all these situations, we will go to this video. This video tries to show us the normal reaction of the leg. This is what we make in some medical tests. As most of you know, this is the reaction of the leg after we make this kind of stimulation on it, and we will see what does this stimulation mean. I will pass to another example also, which is this example. This example is about cat, and I on this. Can you observe here? This is the extension also of the leg when a stimulation is done. And I have to ask, what stimulation is at the origin of this reflex? This is what we call, in the two examples, we call it generally, we call it patellar reflex. This because we make it on the patella, which is the knee, and on the patellar tendon, which relates the muscle on the knee. I will show you them in a few moments. And I have to ask, what stimulation is at the origin of this reflex? Scientists have thought carefully and deeply in these situations in order to understand what is actually the stimulation that is at the origin of this reflex. I will show you. Sherrington experiment tried, Sherrington is a scientist that tried to think about this type of stimulation, and he thought that something is done in the muscle itself, because when we strike the tendon of the muscle, we are exerting some forces on all the body of the muscle. And this strike that is done, it might, for Sherrington, make some kind of, what can you say, stretching, some kind of stretching for the muscle. I will show you. This is the famous cat of Sherrington, and this cat is alive, but we say it is a spinal cat since the spinal cord is sectioned. So the cat doesn't have any message going from from its brain to its body. It cannot make movements in some kind involuntary way. And the muscle, as you see, the cat is alive. The muscle of the thigh is extracted, but the nerve of it still related to it, and it is held and connected to a dynamometer, by its tendon. And Sherrington tried to prove that the stretching of the muscle, when we stretch it, the stretching will make it contracts. Okay, let's see. This is the stretching. I will repeat. This is the stretching. Sherrington tried to make stretching of the muscle by pulling down the table, and this stretching is, this pulling down of the table is going to stretch the muscle, and by stretching the muscle, Sherrington measured the tension of the muscle done by the muscle itself, not by the pulling down of the table. And somehow Sherrington was able to differentiate this force that is done by the table and the force that is done by the muscle itself. Okay? In that case, the muscle itself is stretched and the tension becomes much higher than the first tension. The muscle is stretched by 8 millimeter and it makes a tension by 32 newtons. Sherrington tried to give us the results of his study in this curve. This is the stretching of the muscle. The muscle is stretched in some millimeters, and in the same time, its tension increases gradually till it becomes constant after the stretching of the muscle becomes constant. This is what Sherrington discovered. And in order to understand more this idea, I want to show you the relation between the two ideas. You can see here how the tension of the muscle can be obtained. I will show you again. This is the striking that we are making on the tendon. This is that I told you about the tendon. This is the patellar tendon that relates the extensor muscle of the leg. Try to understand carefully what I'm saying. This is the muscle that we call extensor muscle of the leg because this muscle has the role to extend the leg. But the location of this muscle is on the thigh. The muscle of the thigh that is extensor of the leg has its tendon related to the knee and it is connected here to this bone. When I'm striking this tendon, I'm making this muscle by a small movement of the tendon here inward. I'm making the muscle make stretching. I want you to see it again. So you can see the stretching. This is the stretching of the muscle. As you see here, it is stretched. Okay? Striking the tendon makes the muscle become stretched. Okay. By that, I can define the myotatic reflex. We concluded with Sherrington that stretching the muscle makes it make contraction. And this contraction, because it let the muscle become shorter, the contraction of the muscle, that is the extensor one, as we saw at the beginning, the contraction of the extensor muscle will make extension of the leg. And this is the definition. The myotatic reflex is the contraction of the muscle following its own stretching. This case differs from the case of the reflex that we saw at the beginning. At the beginning, the reflex begins by a sensory receptor and ends by the muscle. In this case, we saw that the stimulation begins in the muscle itself, which is the stretching of the muscle, and we will see in some new slides in the next part of this chapter, we will see this idea by schematic drawings that will make it very clear. But here I have to tell you only that the stretching of the muscle itself, it will make a stretching of the receptor that is inside the muscle, and this stretching will make the muscle contract, and this contraction will be able to make the reaction of the body, which is an extension. So the myotatic reflex that we have explained is the contraction of a muscle following its own stretching. Okay? What is the importance of this reflex? As you see in the girl, we will see now this new girl. This girl, as you see, she is making a kind of balance as the little girl that we saw at the beginning. So you can see the contraction, the continuous contraction of her legs muscles that will make her standing in a balanced state. And in this state also you can see the muscles, and I will show you them in details. You can see how the muscles are getting longer and shorter as her body moves backward and in the opposite way. I will show you. Here you can see this girl. She is making what kind of movement here? She is making a flexion, as you see. This flexion gets the muscle of the leg longer. Okay? This is the muscle length of the leg. And in that case, when she turns on the other state, the leg is a little bit extending. Okay? And this is the length of the muscle of the leg. Sorry, the foot is getting extended a little bit, and this is the muscle of the leg, the length of the muscle of the leg. That's it. What do you observe? In this case, the muscle of the leg becomes shorter. So because of that position of the body, the girl tried to correct it. She made what? A contraction of the muscle of the leg in order to extend the foot. Correct? Let's think about this one. She is trying to make something similar. Every time the girl is bent to one of the sides, in the opposite side, she will make contraction of the muscles in order to correct her body position. So the importance of the myotatic reflex is, as we see here, the stretch reflex or myotatic reflex is very important in posture. It helps maintain proper posturing because of slight lean to either side. Okay, a slight lean to either side causes a stretch in the spinal. The spinal or the spinal, hip, and leg muscles are the muscles of the body, of the trunk, of the leg, and of the hip that are on one of the sides of the body. The stretching of all these muscles will quickly make a stretch reflex. It makes meaning it makes a contraction of all these muscles, and the contraction of all these muscles, if the muscles are here, the stretch, the inclination of the body to this side will make stretching of all the muscles on the other side. This will make contraction of all these muscles that will correct. This process will adjust and maintain the posture of the body in a balanced state. We will explain all this information deeply in the next part of this chapter, but here I'm trying to focus carefully on the main idea. This is a myotatic reflex, I will repeat. It is a contraction of the muscle following its stretching itself. The stretching of the muscle that is followed by contraction will make balance, will adjust the posture of the body in order to keep it balanced on its initial position. Thank you for following me in this very long and very complicated set of ideas, as you saw. And what is the next for us? We will study how are all these what we will say, all these movements, all these reflexes, how are they controlled by the nervous system, by the spinal cord. I will prove, I just proved it in this video, because the cat that was experimented by Sherrington has no brain that is controlling her body, its body. So the nerve center that is responsible for this kind of reflex is the spinal cord itself. And we will prove it. We will talk about it in the next parts of this chapter. But here I'm focusing on the idea that the reflex is a contraction caused by the stretching, and it helps us in maintaining the posture. But in the next videos, we will explain how this reflex is controlled by the spinal cord itself, or by the nerve system, by its all parts, by the nerve and the receptor. What is its receptor? What are its nerves? What are its nerve centers that can modify it, that can control it? We will answer all these questions in the next videos. Thank you for your assistance, and we will explain all these ideas in the next videos. Thank you very much.